Here's an idea. Justin Bieber is as emotionally moving as Franz Liszt, Michelangelo, and Jerusalem. Most of us are guilty of having at least a little fun at Justin Bieber's expense, Idea Channel included. Say what you will about the young Canadian native who was plucked out of obscurity by Usher and went on to be at the top of a multi-quadrillion-dollar pop empire. But his music has clearly had an effect on millions of people the world over. He is one of the most famous entertainers. And hairdos. Hashtag never say never. There's also a pretty good chance that you've had a run-in at one time or another with a belieber. Justin Bieber's fan base is dedicated in the same way that water is wet and fire is hot and Raven is so Raven. It is an essential part of their very being. Now, at first glance, it might seem as though Justin Bieber has nothing in common with 19th century composer and pianist Franz Liszt, who was composing by the age of 9 and hobnobbing with Beethoven and Schubert by 11, who, aside from being one of the greatest pianists of his time, became a benefactor to Richard Wagner, Hector Berlioz, Edvard Grieg, but not before revolutionizing not only piano, but also organ and program music. Actually, at 2nd through 10th glance, it doesn't really appear as though Liszt and Bieber have anything in common. And they don't. Almost. Which is to say, they do have something in common, it's just not biographical or musical. It's psychological. Specifically, it's the psychological effect that they had on their fans. While Liszt's fans came about 100 years before the idea of fandoms even existed, let alone had cute names, there was a term, Lisztomania, to describe the effect he had on his concert attendees. Considered a real, honest-to-God medical condition caused by Franz Liszt himself, Listomania was coined by author Heinrich Heine, no snickering, to describe the extreme hysteria exhibited by Liszt's fans, making it a pretty close cousin to the more modern Bieber Fever.
I got a fever!
People would clamber to catch his discarded gloves and handkerchiefs. He'd be met with exuberant crowds of ecstatic admirers. People would save and even sometimes wear his discarded cigar butts as jewelry. Blech. Sound familiar? Well, except for the cigar butts. Now, while Liszt may have been the first and Bieber one of the more recent, that doesn't make them the only. This sort of thing actually happens with some frequency. Beatlemania, One Directioners, Katy Cats, Little Monsters, Hulkamania, all crazes focused around a particular cult of personality. Crazes which can have, in many cases, intense effects on its participants. It's actually a widespread enough phenomenon that there is a name for the psychological effect that these crazes have on people. Sort of. Bear with me for a second. Stendhal syndrome is the name given to the dizziness, fainting, shortness of breath, confusion, and even hallucination experienced by art viewers. Also called Florence syndrome because of the frequency with which it affects tourists to the old school Italian art mecca, it usually has to do with an artwork's extreme beauty. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel or David, Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, Botticelli's Birth of Venus, or basically anything by Caravaggio. All works possessing of some brain short-circuiting amount of oomph or zazz or it. It's not just works of art that can cause someone to flip their lid a little, though. Jerusalem syndrome describes when otherwise sane and balanced people experience extreme religious delusion and psychosis upon visiting the Holy Land. They walk around in makeshift togas and shout psalms. Paris syndrome, experienced disproportionately by young female Japanese tourists, describes the extreme anxiety at trying to reconcile the cultural ideal of Paris with its, no offense, sort of rude, dirty reality. All of these things, the creation of Adam, Monet's water lilies, Paris, Jerusalem, Liszt's piano playing, and yes, even Justin Bieber, possess an extreme subjective beauty experienced by so many people. But what these things also possess is an extreme cultural significance, a weight inspired by, but also beyond, their history, palette, skill, or hairdo. Which leads us to wonder this: how much of the intense reaction to these things is inspired by their zazz or their itness, and how much is inspired by something else?
What the French call a certain, I don't know what.
Liszt was an incredible pianist, Caravaggio a masterful artist, and I can objectively identify what it is about As Long As You Love Me that millions of people enjoy. But as fast and as skillfully and as awesomely as Liszt can play piano or Bieber can Bieb, notes or even brushstrokes for that matter by themselves can't cause someone to faint or hallucinate. Phenomenological philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty wrote that in perception we do not think the object, and we do not think ourselves thinking it. We are given over to the object, and we merge into this body that is more informed than we are about the world. When we experience music and artworks, we aren't thinking about transverse pressure waves or light bouncing off of paint, even though in essence that is exactly what we are perceiving. The moment in which you experience these things, in the arena, surrounded by believers in a quiet gallery in front of the Mona Lisa, they assemble. along with something else, and we become aware. The combination of a thing's quality, its effect on you specifically, and the creation of a relationship between you and a culture or community through its shared experience makes something like Justin Bieber, for example, vastly more than the sum of his parts. And sure, you can make the argument that Bieber's quality, or even the Mona Lisa's for that matter, is manufactured or false. But think about it. If whoever is doing the manufacturing had their way, everything would be as successful as Justin Bieber and the Mona Lisa. Combined, it would all be some kind of Bieber-Lisa. It's that something else that's tricky. The something that's in common between all effective art and performance. Something in common between Liszt, Bieber, Guernica, and heck, maybe even Jerusalem, the Pantheon, and Aston Martin, or I don't know, Yosemite National Park, that can cause a person to just
it's so beautiful.
All right. What do you guys think? What are the psychological and cultural conditions that will cause a person to be tremendously moved by a work of art? Let us know in the comments. And there's actually another syndrome called Idea Channel Syndrome, where otherwise sane and balanced people subscribe to our show. It could be you. No one can help you. You must face the comment section alone. Let's see what you guys had to say about D&D. So in general, a ton of amazing stories about people learning about themselves and their friends and their community through playing tabletop games. If you ever needed any inspiration on why to start playing tabletop games, last week's comment thread is the place to find it. So thank you for sharing. Flincher0 says that D&D can increase your chances to become a more confident person, but that one of the really important parts of the equation is the people that you're playing with, and that if they're not willing to experiment or do crazy things, then the game might be a little bit boring. And Redrick1987 says something similar, that if your DM doesn't encourage experimentation or trying weird stuff, then your game might be a little flat. Both of which are very solid points. Chris Aroni is curious about how to get started with D&D. So, I mean, you can go to like a Barnes & Noble or to the internet and buy one of the $50 packs, but one of the beauties of tabletop gaming is that you don't really need any more than just some pieces of paper, a pencil, and a bunch of dice. And then you just get together with some of your friends and start telling a story, and when someone wants to try something, roll for it and see how it goes and just go from there. It's kind of the beauty of the whole system. 2 pineapples of physics. Thank you very much. And also, really? Let's put the captioning system to a test. A skunk sat on a stump and thunk the stump stunk, but the stump thunk the skunk stunk. To Apocalypse Detonator, we're very happy that you like the show, but we promise that the videos will still be here when your calc homework is done, which you should do. You should do your calc homework. RPG Research says that they are actually doing research to figure out whether or not the claims that were made in last week's video are true, and says that they have a bunch of data and figures and stuff to back it up. So if you're interested, you should check that out. Nyan2 says that being a dungeon master has made him very organized and has been a great learning experience for him. And both he and the Mr. Fountain are curious about my ideal RPG character, which I'm not gonna spend time doing it right now because it's not interesting to a lot of people, but if you go to the very end of this video, I will describe my ideal tabletop character. Don't Mock My Smock says that his personal experience indicates that the thesis of last week's video is completely false, and that he does not think Dungeons & Dragons players are, in general, more confident or more successful, which there's no discounting personal experience, so thanks for telling us. Marvel's Me makes a really interesting point about the fact that we make use of the thoughts of many different philosophers on Idea Channel, some of whom might disagree with one another. And my response to this is that in media and in technology and in like theory and stuff, that you have to deal with many conflicting philosophies in the same way that you do in everyday life. And that really, no matter how smart any one person is, they don't get it 100%. And so that's why we sort of cherry pick from the thoughts of the people who we think are the most interesting. So, my ideal RPG character.